and thank you so much for joining us today. You are listening to Society Bites Radio, social interaction for the mind and soul. It is part of the Radio Ear Network family. I am your host, Sue Ashby, and this is Over the Edge. Today, we are talking to Johnnie Calloway. We've done a program with him before. He's a certified thought coach at the Institute for Transformational Thinking. He is going to talk to us today about children and PTSD. This is something that I guess I hadn't really thought about a lot. So, Johnnie, welcome to the show. It's always good to talk to you. Let's talk about PTSD in children.
Well, first, let me express my gratitude for the opportunity to be here. And I really love to talk on the topics that are, I guess you would say, out of the norm. And this is one of them, and the results of it, because it can be paralyzing. So, okay, I'll open it up with sharing a little bit about my own journey with PTSD as a child, and where it came from and what I ended up having to do with it and what the results of it were.
Okay.
Where my PTSD, my first trauma came from was the death of my mother at the age of 5. I was the epitome of a mother's boy, a mommy's boy, really, and then all of a sudden she was gone. And nobody knew how to explain to me what was going on. All I was told was, God took your mom and she's with him now, which just fueled my anger and made it really difficult for me to want to turn to a God, to a source of anything that might be able to help me, because why would I do that? He took my mom.
Absolutely.
So the thing is that I've learned in my own journey with recovering and learning to live with PTSD is I learned this from a Dr. Eric Gentry, whose specialty is trauma. And he said the most amazing thing. He has said a lot of amazing things about the subject. And one of them is when a child, especially anybody really, but when a child is traumatized, they are robbed of hope. And the world becomes an unsafe place to live. And therefore, moving forward from the trauma, every stimulus that they encounter with fear. And the way they react to the fear is fight or flight. And I will never forget when he first told me that, it resonated so true for me, because that's how I had been my entire life. I used to say to people all the time, even before I really got into this stuff, that I never thought anything through. I would have a thought, and that thought would be immediately followed by an event. And what Dr. Gentry spoke of that just made my life make so much more sense to me, when you are reacting in fear from any stimulus, then there is no thought process. There's no gap between the stimulus and the reaction. You just react. And so there's what happens is that is also huge as how to deal with this. Since hope is the thing we don't have, the thing we were robbed of, hope is also the antidote. But we are afraid of hope. Hope represents if we hope, we're vulnerable. If we hope, we're exposed to the world and its wrongdoings. So therefore, even if hope shows up in our life, we shut it out, because we're afraid of what the hope will bring. And so many times our hope ends up in disappointment. So it's like, okay, I'm not trying. I'm not even trying. I'm not going to believe that I can do better. I'm not going there, because I'm just going to end up more hurt. Does that make sense, Susan?
Absolutely. I think it was you that said on the last program that you think most people in this day and age suffer from some element of PTSD.
Yes.
Just because we're blitzed by news and stuff like that. I lost my mother at 13, so I have never been diagnosed with it, but I resonate exactly with what you're saying. For many, many years, I had no hope, and trying hope always failed. So why would I? So continue with your story, Johnny.
Well, then the other thing that is just a big part of the piece of this is there's no trust. You can't afford to trust somebody, especially in a situation where your trauma comes from losing a parent or from an abusive parent, because they're the ones that are quote unquote supposed to be protecting you.
Mm.
And then let's go with the idea of an abusive parent. Okay, everybody, society, all the Hallmark cards, everything says your parents are always there for you. Your parents love you. You can always trust them. But that's not so. That's simply not so, because I have worked with so many people who their main source of hurt came from what their parents did to them. I'm one of those people. After my mother passed, she left me with a very angry, alcoholic, sexually abusive, violent father.
Right.
I could not trust him.
And he was all you had to go to. I mean, effectively. Right.
So then it's like when people did show up in my life, some of this stuff, it's just my story. It's not a blanket thing for all people that have suffered with childhood PTSD. But for me, anybody that showed up in my life telling me they loved me, telling me I could trust them, they became a victim to my anger of being left. So the people that tried to pull me in and teach me that trust was okay were the people that I, quote unquote, went after, because I lived in a world, my world was get them before they get you. And so I would either rob them, I would leave them. I did all kinds of crazy things to protect myself. You're not going to hurt me, I'm going to hurt you. And it's really sad and it's really twisted. That's coming from the wounded mind of a 5-year-old.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, I got to protect myself. The world's not a safe place. These people that tell me they love me are out to get me.
And even the fact that your mother died was something that would make you angry, because how could she? Why would she? Because you don't have the understanding at that age.
Right. And see, and in my particular case, again, this is not a blanket thing. This is me. I felt guilty for my mother's death because I did not kiss her goodbye when the last time I saw her. And when I got home from that visit with her at the hospital, I got a spanking for not kissing her. Then the next time I saw her, she was in a casket. And that 5-year-old mind translated that into, because what my dad said to me as he was spanking me is, here your mother lies on her deathbed and you, her only son, won't even kiss her goodbye.
Oh, God, that's so cruel.
And then what I had on my back was, now then, he's an alcoholic because I took his wife. My sister's acting erratically because I took her mother. Now my sister's got to be my father's wife because she's no longer there. All of that became my fault.
Yeah, I wish you were here. I'd give you a huge hug, Johnny.
Thank you. I'll just say thank you to that. But the thing is, so how do we then, with that information, and I believe every bit of what I just said to you is so, but with that information, okay, now how do we help someone dealing with PTSD? They don't trust us. They're afraid to trust us. They're afraid to have hope even that they can trust us. So how do we help them?
Yeah, that's tricky.
What we have to do is be vigilant and committed to showing them we can be trusted. Here's one of the things I was thinking about this morning about trying to be ready for this show. Let's say a parent dies and a child ends up in a foster home. Now, the thing is, that child goes into that foster home on guard.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I can't trust these people. My mother left me. Why should I think that these people won't? Now, there's a thing about the human condition that is very important to me, and that is our minds are committed to the desire to be right. So if I'm thinking you can't be trusted, so let's just say this is you and I, and I'm thinking Susan can't be trusted. There's a part of my mind that's looking for evidence to prove that that is so.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you tell me you're going to, let's say I'm a child, actually, and you tell me, Johnny, I'll be there at 4:30 to pick you up, and I'll take you to the park. Well, something happens, you get in the traffic, whatever, you don't show up till 5 o'clock. That mind, that child's mind, is going to say, see?
I was right. She's let me down.
I knew she couldn't be trusted.
Yeah.
I knew one more time I was going to be let down, and I've been let down. So you know what? I'm not trusting anybody else is going to show up. And when you go into the world with that kind of outlook of like nobody can be trusted, nobody's going to show up, everybody's going to leave me, it becomes a very, very lonely, dark place.
I'm sure.
So when we are trying to, quote unquote, help somebody with that, we have to be very conscious as to what we're telling them we're going to do. I had a niece and nephew when they were 7 years old. They were twins, come to live with me. And I didn't know any of this then. But what I did know was consistency was important. I was already in recovery for some time, and I knew from working on my own childhood that the one thing these kids were going to do from the onset was they were going to be testing me to see how far the rope went. And so if I told them 5 o'clock, it had to happen at 5 o'clock. Because I needed them to know that they could count on me. So if I had any thought whatsoever that I wasn't going to be able to be there at 5 o'clock, I had to be very specific in my terminology with them. You know what? I'm going to try to be here at 5 o'clock, but I may not be here till 6. That way, if I don't show up, it's not a mark against me.
Right.
Because they're looking to make marks against me, especially those two children. They've been traumatized themselves already a couple times, and I knew that they needed consistency. So I gave them that. And to this day, those children will tell you how important their time with me was, and how important, I will tell you how important my time with them was, because in learning how to be consistent with them, I learned how to be more consistent with myself.
That's a fantastic story. And I mean, it makes such sense. It makes such sense personally to me from my experiences, and it will resonate with our listeners, I'm absolutely sure.
Well, see, and the other piece of this that, again, in my particular story that was very important, one of the things I was so angry about with my dad throughout my entire childhood was one of his teachings was don't hope. I would say, well, I think I want to be a baseball star, or I think I want to be whatever. And my dad would say, don't even go there. That ain't ever going to happen for you. Now, as a kid, that made me very angry. But as an adult now that's had to deal with this stuff, I look back, and what my dad was trying to do was to save me from the pain of disappointment, because in his world, none of it ever panned out. So in a really twisted sense, that was his way of trying to love me.
Yeah. No, I understand that. He didn't want you to be disappointed.
He didn't want me to feel the pain that he had felt.
Yeah.
It's that simple. So even though he was abusive, but my dad and I ended up having this miraculous transition in our relationship, and by the time he died, we were friends. And we were really close. So that's a whole nother